Hello, everybody. CatSheet1383 with CatSheet Gaming, and this week there are two games. First one being Murder by Numbers, not to be confused with a 2002 movie, developed by Mediatonic back in 2020, or I should say that it was released in 2020, and published by the Irregular Corporation. So let me just play this intro here because I thought it showed some promise, kind of like a Saturday morning cartoon. Anyways, it's supposed to be a puzzle adventure game, indie game. Indie, yes. Puzzle, yes. Adventure, no. It plays more like a visual novel, which means I didn't get too far in it. It got very boring really fast. And on top of that, when I was doing the initial puzzles, the second one that they have you go through, they force you to black out parts of it and X out others. And it turns out the solution to the puzzle, they kind of told you parts to black out that didn't need to be blacked out, and parts that should have been X'd out that didn't need to be X'd out. I sort of just made an assumption it was being honest with me, but it turns out it wasn't, and then it kind of just keeps getting worse from there, because then it turns into a boatload of dialogue with a whole lot of nothing happening, maybe asking some questions in terms of dialogues, and I didn't get very far at all. I mean, the basic premise is that your character plays a detective in a show, gets fired, the showrunner slash producer gets murdered, and that's about as far as I got. I'm assuming the finger might have been pointed at your character. Who knows? It just wasn't compelling to constantly read that much at this point in time. I mean, I'm no stranger to having to read dialogue. I grew up in the 80s and 90s and 2000s in terms of video games, and I played my share of Japanese video games before they introduced voice acting. This is not quite the same. This was just boring, unfortunately. At least it was for me. It might rock somebody else's boat or float it, whatever term you want to use. But unfortunately, this one just wasn't doing it for me. So the next game is The Elder Scrolls Online. I'm not going to make an assumption that everybody knows what this game is. So it was published by Bethesda Softworks, developed by ZeniMax Online Studios, and clearly it belongs in the Elder Scrolls series. So basically Skyrim, Oblivion, Morrowind, Redfall, all those games. But this is their massively multiplayer game that they put out years ago, back in 2014, yes. And they've added a boatload of expansions to it since then. I am currently playing elsewhere because I have it on Steam and I already had it on there instead of having to download the whole entire thing again, or a totally separate version of it again for Epic, but I'm assuming it's very similar and that you have to set up a Bethesda account and all that other fun stuff. So it doesn't quite feel like a typical Bethesda game. It kind of feels like a cross between World of Warcraft, in a sense, and a Bethesda game, since it is online. As, I don't know, the best way to put it is that you level up, you get more skills that you can use. Kind of similar to World of Warcraft, where you start off with very few and you get more as you continue on with the game. This is very similar in that some of these skills are activated just by using the number keys very similarly. I did find myself running out of inventory space really fast, though. no matter what I did. And I felt that the menus were kind of obnoxiously overcrowded. And in some cases, because I haven't played in a while, I wasn't sure what I was looking at anymore. It hasn't really pushed any buttons I thought it would. It did come recommended a long time ago for a game that, if you don't want to pay a subscription fee to, let's say, World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy 14, try this one out. I haven't found it nearly as compelling as the other two, although I find Final Fantasy 14 to be more compelling at this moment, although I haven't played it in a really long time. That's neither here or there. And I'd be remiss to not mention Guild Wars 2, because you could also play that, but this is about the Elder Scrolls Online. It controlled pretty smoothly for the most part. Like I said, probably the most negative aspect were the obnoxious amount of menus that they have, and kind of how cluttered they feel in terms of trying to navigate them and figure out what's going on. And nothing I did right at this point was too difficult. At least this particular dungeon, I was just hunting down some poachers. The one thing I would say outside of the menus in terms of the actual gameplay, though, is some of these enemies have a very short respawn rate, and I would have to kill the same group over and over again, looking around trying to find these poachers in this particular dungeon. And it kind of got a little irritatingly repetitive, having to kill the same groups over and over again. I mean, you can just not really be in a group, but other adventurers can come into the same dungeon you're already in. And I guess that's why they did that. But it made it a bit of a slog to get through this particular dungeon, having to fight these same groups over and over, to the point where it was just kind of annoying, and it slowed the adventure down a little too much for my taste. I don't know. This one might actually be a game where it's better with friends than it is by yourself. I've had multiple of those. So I don't know. If you want to try this game, it is free until Thursday this week, which would be July 27th at 10 a.m. Central Time. Technically 9:59 a.m. Anyways, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. Have a good one.